Welcome to the world of tomorrow. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future.
The atomic age was born.
The world of tomorrow became the world of today,
bringing together all people in a new era of understanding.
Good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain operating at millionths of a second speed.
Electrical pulses transmitted with the speed of light.
Limitless power at man's command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force.
Combat Information Center is alert. Its radars probing the darkness, ready to give early warning of any unseen enemy.
But have no fear, we are monitoring the situation.
Steve, how we doing?
You know, we are just monitoring situations, Vasily.
As always, we must continue to monitor.
Monitor all the things.
So it's been a few days since we got on last time. We talked about the Skinner box.
Hot
and
minute,
I don't know if you
as
have
it
any,
were.
A hot minute. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Maybe we can get to it later on because I've got a little item that I want to invoke here, maybe to do a little bit of a further riff. But so we had Easter, of course, and that's really busy on the home front and on the school front. So I feel like I'm kind of dragging myself out of things. But you, my friend, have continued to monitor the situation for real. And I'm just curious, in that time, I mean, it feels like a forever ago, but is anything at all salient to you in terms of the monitoring you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say monitoring in a way to my own detriment. It's getting really crazy out there, you know, and we're watching also. So again, you know, for the viewers at home, we do most of our monitoring on X because that's where all of the world's information goes. It's considered the #1 news website in the world. It's not always great for that because of the amount of zone flooding and disinformation that's going on there. And actually, we should probably at some point today pull up that tweet I sent you from Walter Kern about the scriptification of news stories. I think that would be an interesting thing to talk about. Yeah. But, you know, so obviously the thing that's been most dominant has been the stuff about the war. But it's extremely confusing because the situation changes constantly. I mean, a ceasefire was called the other night, and within seconds, Iran's launching new missiles at Israel and everybody else. You know, so even today, I was like, is the ceasefire, did it happen? Is it not happening? Like, I'm not even sure what's real anymore. And the administration's acting like it is, but then they're saying that the talking points from Iran that were put forward by Pakistan are actually not the real ones, and CNN shouldn't have run with them. And there's all this back and forth that's going on. Very, very difficult to get to the bottom of it. And today there's another example of this with this story you've probably seen bubbling up on Catholic Twitter about, did the papal nuncio to the United States meet with the Pentagon, and was, you know, he basically kind of threatened that you need to get in line with us because we have the military, we can do whatever we want. Of course, it comes from an extremely unreliable source.
Yeah, right. Yeah, keep going.
In the person of Christopher Hale, Mr. left lib Catholic himself. A lot of people are saying it reads like fan fiction. The Pentagon saying this is not what happened. We had a respectful conversation with the nuncio. Pope Leo, though, has been kind of a jerk towards America of late, you know, decrying what's going on with the war, but not saying a word about Iran's own human rights abuses against its own people and the massacre of, you know, they're now saying 40,000 people within a couple of days. I mean, the video that you asked me about today, about me vague posting, was a video of millions of people on the streets of Tehran back in January who were protesting for freedom. All they had to do was unload some machine guns into that crowd. And that's allegedly what happened.
You know, as you're laying this stuff out, something just popped into my head. I sort of tried out with you, but it's not necessarily a novel insight, but it surfaced. But it's, you know, for those of us who do a lot of monitoring, you know, here we are, you know, on X, when we can. My classes can be a real inconvenience for this monitoring, but nonetheless, there very much seems to be at least, a couple of realities that are in play. And while, again, that's not necessarily a novel insight, I find it fascinating. There's this legacy game that's going on, at the level of statecraft, I guess we would call it, and that seems to be the one, we've talked about the post-war consensus, like that seems to be the one that like official speak occurs in. And then there's these subterranean layers of things that are also going on. And most of the time I feel like I can connect the dots between, the official, accepted, conversation layer and all of these, reactionary and neo-reactionary and alt takes on things. But it just feels increasingly like I can't even tie the red yarn in such a way to make sense of it. And all of the, again, the official layer and the various other alternative layers, don't feel terribly authentic to me.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, that's just strange.
Well, I mean, to go back to something we've talked about before, and I'm sure we'll talk about again, we grew up in an era where to get the information, you watched the news, you read the newspaper. Like, those were the things that you did. There were only a few available options. Even when cable news kicked off, there was only a few additional options. You had a handful of sources, half a dozen, where you would go to get information, and those would be the filters on what was legitimate, what wasn't, what was vetted, what wasn't. That's gone now. Like, nobody trusts the mainstream media anymore. I don't think on either side of the political spectrum. And so your stuff gets filtered through these accounts that are online that are reporting things that sound real, but are they AI generated? Are they not? They're anonymous accounts 9 times out of 10. So they can build up a certain credibility because of their, consistency in reporting on things in a way that seems accurate. But at the same time, you don't know
Right.
who's behind the account. You don't know what sources they have. You don't have you don't even have the trust for Reagan's trust but verify. You don't know. Yeah. And so what you end up doing is, if you want to understand what's really going on, you have to do a lot of sifting. You have to go through a lot of stuff that maybe is false, probably is false. You'll look at official accounts and see if there's corroboration there, if the story shows up. If it doesn't, it's very, very difficult. I find it's getting more and more difficult to get to what feels like the truth in a comprehensive way. And then on top of that, just the nature of the infinite scroll, you don't feel like you're getting to the truth. So you keep scrolling, you keep going back. You're like, I feel like I'm missing something. And it pulls you in more and more to this dopamine doom loop of, I really want to know what's going on. And I'm not sure that I'm getting any of that from the effort.
Well, say what you will about the say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism. No,
at least
say
it's an
what
ethos.
You will. At least it has an ethos, dude. Say what you will about the legacy media, and by that we mean, of course, network news, New York Times, all those, when we were kids, important platforms. Each of the outlets, both in print and in television media, had what we would call an ombudsman.
Mm-hmm.
Ombudsman, an ombudsman, right? And an ombudsman was this sort of internal figure that held, that was separate from the editorial office, I guess, or the, the editorial, floor of the building, but would serve as a kind of the guy who calls balls and strikes.
Okay.
And so the ombudsman, how much that was, 100% accurate, I have my doubts on, but at least there was this sensibility in place that, you could get things wrong. And if you get things wrong, either the editor has to issue a correction, or the ombudsman would be able to kind of speak up and say, hey, look, guys, Tuesday's coverage on X, Y, and Z, total crap, right? And I don't think we have an ombudsman, right? An independent, neutral official who does internal investigations, researches complaints, resolves disputes, this sort of like a boss, like it's a boss who's not a boss, it's a boss who's not necessarily the editor, but functions as a kind of conscience for a platform. And again, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to like look back with rosy colored glasses like, oh, well, back in the day we had an ombudsman who did important work, but at least it was a recognition that your credibility was incumbent on your willingness to be fact checked by an independent judge.
Well, I would take it even further and say that we're dealing with something where we've talked about this before, but the first impression is the only impression that matters when things are moving at this speed and memory is so short, right? So something that happened again the other day, an egregious error that never should have gotten through. A New York Times headline, I think it was for an op-ed that said,
yes, this is great.
How can we have a North American treaty organization, NATO, without America? And it's like, no, it's North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Right. That's what it's called. And they did end up correcting it. But the thing is when these things go out and millions of people see them, that's what they're left with. They remember that. There's going to be countless people who think that's what NATO is from here on out because they saw that in the headline. And that's just how it goes now.
Right. Right. In the particular example is not particularly important, but I think the model or the pattern is absolutely in play almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this rush to be first, because frankly, the rush to be first pays off from what I understand. You get the clicks and, you get the monetization of attention is obvious, but it's a real problem. But even beyond that, I mean, what's frustrating, I think, for me is that, even think about a news program, think about a newspaper. Like there's literally an end to the news program.
Right.
I got to the last page of the New York Times today.
There's some closure to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like even mentally, my dad tells me when he was a boy and even a young professional in growing up in New Orleans that they had a morning newspaper, an afternoon newspaper, and then a final edition, right? The so-called "This is all the news" on, April 9th, 2026, and there it is, right? And if it's not there, it'll have to happen the next day, mm-hmm. right? And there's a kind of mental relief in that I think I don't know, I have under indexed in terms of its importance. Well, when something is always on, it's almost like it's never on.
Yeah, in a way, because there's no beginning and no end. You can just dive in at any time. I mean, look, this comports to something that we all started having to deal with in everyday life in the early 2000s when it went from you went to work or, whatever, you came home and they were two different worlds, right? Now you could be expecting an email at any time. Yeah. I mean, I remember I was working for a PR firm in around 2006, 2007 near DC, and they issued BlackBerries to everybody.
I was just going to bring up the BlackBerry.
Yeah, because they wanted everybody to be accessible if there was an emergency, right? If there was a story that needed to get covered or whatever. But this is this intrusive thing where it's like, we're not going to just trust that you're checking your email at night. We're going to give you a company-issued device so that if something goes out, like you have no excuse not to be checking on that. And this is something that has grown so that our lives never really have downtime. People don't know how to relax and have days off. I mean, I don't know how. I tried to give myself a day off because I've been working a lot, and I tried to do it on Monday, and I ended up still online all day reading stuff, trying to figure out what was going on. And I was like, this was not relaxing at all. What was I doing? Yeah, but it's really difficult to kind of tune out of the Palantir, so to speak.
I think you're right. And I have my personal frustrations with that. This was maybe 2 weeks ago. I just distinctly remember this, and I had some homework that I had to do. I had to, do some prep for my class the next day, and something was happening. I was monitoring, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever, right? I flatter myself. I'm monitoring, and I'm saying to myself as I'm scrolling, Kale, you need to get off. You really,
Yeah.
you have to get off.
Yeah, you start having that
You know,
conversation with yourself out loud sometimes because
out
it's
loud.
the only thing that breaks the spell.
And I couldn't do it. Finally, one of my dogs whimpered and, needed to go outside to use the bathroom. And it kind of like broke me out of this.
But did you walk out with your phone and open it back up without even thinking about it? I did that the other day where I'm like, I got to get away from the computer. And then I pick up my phone, I open it. And the first thing I do is go right back to it. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Right. And, part of this is a you and me problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair to say.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are very, it's not so much fear of missing out on like events. Like you and I are not like super social people. But it's fear of missing out on like what's going on.
Well, and it's also, we've made the analogy before to this being kind of like our sports. I mean, we both watch football, but we're not super into all the sports. We're not watching every game
Football's
on a Sunday.
Really kind of it for me.
Yeah, same here. But the thing is that it has that same feeling of like, I have to watch. I have to see if my team scored a point. I have to see like where's the game right now? Because I had to go to the kitchen and, make wings. And now I'm like, did we miss a touchdown? It's that constant feeling, and the game never ends.
Yeah. Right. And we have these kind of these fake quarters and half times, like the midterms are coming up. Like, it's like, so this is what I'm struggling with, right? Because, there's a lot going on, objectively speaking, right? Again, whatever that means, like you said, the war in Iran, our seemingly inevitable chase of AGI.
Yeah, and there are a couple more stories I do want to talk about if we can slot them in.
Good. Well, go ahead. Just slot them in now.
Okay.
Because I'm going to rattle off. There are real things going on.
Yeah. So I would say, to hit on the themes we're constantly touching on, the acceleration of the end of the post-war order really, really becoming clear. Something I don't know if you caught over the weekend. I was actually working on Sunday because it was a busy day, and there was this thing about how we rescued these two pilots that got shot down in Iran.
Yeah.
And the Europeans were making this big deal about how we blew up our own planes because this rescue mission was complicated. We had to land these planes. Over 100 million worth of planes. I've seen estimates up to 300 million. Couldn't get back out because they couldn't get a long enough runway, so they had to scuttle the planes, right?
Because it's such a heavy plane, right?
Yeah, and so we had to blow up our own planes, get on other aircraft to get out of there. We managed to rescue both guys. Nobody got killed. It was an amazing operation in the middle of a place, where we're currently engaged in a war, and it's not a ground war, to pull off this operation that we did. But the Europeans were talking about us in a derogatory way, sacrificing so much money to save one guy. And it was really, really interesting to see this divide play out between the European mentality and the American mentality. And it was coming out in all kinds of stories. It was coming out in other ways. And it's coalescing with this feeling that Western Europe is pulling away more and more and more. I mean, I mentioned the New York Times headline. It actually does, despite its error, underline something that's really going on. I don't know how much longer we're going to be in NATO. We are actively talking about if Europe doesn't want us protecting them and funding all these military bases where we have our guys stationed, then we could save a bunch of money. Let's pull them out. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe is like, hey, we're on board. Japan's like, hey, we'd love to be your buddy. Like the shift in global alignment is happening aggressively and very fast.
So I think that there are a couple of ways to read this, or these are the kind of takes that I see on this, right? That in most of the time, this involves, Trump being some kind of, I can't ever quite tell what people think of Trump. Like, I can't quite tell if they think he's evil and conniving, or that he's a bumbling
Fool.
idiot, or that he's like not just dumb, but like crazy. And, I have my own sort of takes on these things. I think he's an odd guy. But I don't really ascribe to any of those takes, I guess. But I see people are trying to like load onto Trump this kind of almost like a, well, they're just trying to, it's all him, right? Like it's all him as this, he's some sort of like a one-man wrecking ball. And there's something to be said for that. Like, it's not that he's not a wrecking ball. But it's as if he is sort of de novo doing this because he woke up today and
right.
the Big Mac he ate last night, isn't sitting well in the tummy. And he hasn't had his third Diet Coke yet. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how you can kind of hold that idea exactly in your head. Because in some sense, they're ascribing Trump a kind of level of agency and conniving that I don't even think is totally accurate.
Yeah. I know what you mean. First of all, it's context specific, whether he's dumb or whether he's, megalomaniacal and malicious. Right. Like, it really depends on what's going on, but one thing you have to say, and you and I share this combination of amusement, fascination, frustration, everything with Trump.
Yeah.
But the guy, like it or not, like, you don't luck your way into so many outcomes that are what you wanted. Like, something is going on here that makes more sense than people are giving him credit for. The big thing, this week, everybody's accusing him of war crimes because he says something about, how they're gonna wipe out a civilization, and it's like, clearly, first of all, it's clearly hyperbole. Again, people keep forgetting this is a dude from Queens, and that's all they do is speak in hyperbole there. Everything's the best thing they ever had or the worst thing they ever had. It's all exaggerated, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, there's an actual theory in geopolitics. It comes from Nixon. It's called the madman theory of geopolitics. And there was it's a memoir. I can't remember the guy's name, who was Nixon's aide. But during the Vietnam War, Nixon said to the guy, look, I want the Vietnamese to think I'm a crazy bastard and I'm willing to nuke them. They need to believe that I'm willing to do anything because it's the only way we can negotiate, right?
I remember in Trump's first term, it was a Chinese analyst and was being interviewed by a journalist, and the journalist was doing the kind of typical Trump's an idiot, script with this official, and the official basically said something to the effect of like, we are scared out of our minds by Trump because there's no rule book for him, right? Like, and I don't mean rule book in terms of morality. That's a different discussion. I mean a rule book in terms of the way we do business, right? And part of what I'm hearing you say, Steve, is this post-war consensus that we've been yammering on about. And I think we yammer on about it for good reason. I don't mean to belittle our conversations, but the breakdown of the post-war consensus is because the script is not in any way, shape, or form working, and it is only serving, our bureaucracy. It does not serve actual interest, right, or an interest of a people or something like that. And I feel like that is a lesson that people keep not getting. Again, not as an endorsement, a down the line checklist endorsement of every, tweet and every, appearance and everything he says and does and all this sort of thing. But it does seem to be clear that he loves leverage games, and he doesn't care about what the fancy smart people think about it. I mean, like, he really doesn't. And that's
a superpower when you're in a position like he is.
Yeah.
He has spoken in the past about the leverage advantages in negotiation that come from unpredictability. And anybody who's ever been in any kind of negotiation, I mean, and as high stakes as it gets for most people is like buying a house. It's a very expensive thing. You're negotiating with the seller, whoever has the most leverage, typically financial leverage in a transaction like that, has the power to determine how that transaction is going to go. If you can walk away from the table, if you can say, well, I'll take my ball and go home, and the other guy really wants something, you have power in that situation. And people don't seem to understand that in geopolitics, you have to lean on power, and you have to lean on leverage, and you have to basically say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish the goal. Even if you're not, they need to believe that you are, because it raises the ceiling of possible options. They may say, okay, I know he's not going to wipe out our whole civilization, but maybe he's going to do like 50% more than we thought he was going to do, and that's still a problem for us.
Right. Yeah. So I think we're dealing with two things here. You're dealing with like pattern recognition, and you're also dealing with a certain predictability quotient, right? And I'm going to give you two sports examples. Sorry, but I got to do it. The first one, and this you can find it. It's on X. It's been around on Instagram, et cetera. But sorry, my words. It's an interview about two guys, ex-professional baseball players. And one is a catcher, and one is a hitter, and one is a pitcher. And I believe the pitcher is Greg Maddux from the Atlanta Braves, and the hitter was Jeff Bagwell, and I forget the name of the catcher. Anyway, so the catchers sort of talk about this story. In some game early on in the season, the Braves, Maddux is up like 8-1. It's the eighth inning. They're going to win this game because Maddux is an ace. And so Maddux throws a meatball, with a specific count. He throws a meatball and lets Bagwell hit a home run. So the catcher comes on up after the hit, and Bagwell runs around. The catcher comes up to Maddux like, Greg, what the hell are you doing? He's like, this game is over, right? I'm setting him up. And the catcher's sort of like, well, what are you talking about? This is a good team, Maddux says. Mm-hmm. We're going to see them again in the postseason or down the stretch where we really need this game. So whatever, goes away. Sure enough.
Give him a false sense of confidence, yeah.
End of the season, same situation, got to get this guy out. Maddux knows what he's done. Sets him up just like, the at-bat from, early spring. And instead of serving up, the meatball, gives him a changeup from the first look, strikes him out, game over, Braves move on, right? So this sort of perfect example. And Maddux understood that batters are pattern recognizers. And you can actually jam their pattern recognition by using
false signal,
false signal, right? Another example, Andre Agassi was famous for his ability to return serve. And he's in a match against Boris Becker early on in Agassi's career. Becker was, a serving god. And at a certain point, Agassi figures out, again, I think it's a similar type of situation. It's late in the match. Agassi's going to lose this thing, but he figures out how to read the signal of the toss or, whatever, some sort of read, like a good poker player, right? He figures it out. And then he plays around with it, and sure enough, he's got it, but doesn't give it away. Right. And so then people are asking, oh, you had a pretty good return of serve today. And, Agassi's sort of playing the game like, I don't know, man, I never really know what's going on, whatever, that kind of thing. Of course, later on, he would have rather been shot in the head than reveal that he knew how to read Boris Becker's serve. And even in a match in which he wants to win and he is winning, he can't do it too well, because if he starts to do it, then Becker's going to be like, oh, crap, he knows exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to mix it up, right? So you're kind of lulling your opponent into this, sense that they're either not being monitored or they're not being played, right? And so what I find truly mind-blowing, the two of us are, on our own lonesome, watching Twitter and doing these kinds of things every other schmo on the planet. And yet our professional commentariat seem to fall for it in the same way over and over and over again. And I just, is it just they're too close to it? Like, are they just too wedded to like what they want to believe? What do you make of that, Steve?
Well, I mean, the first thing I want to say is while you were talking, I thought of two very famous axioms from Sun Tzu and The Art of War. The first is that all war is deception.
Yeah.
And the second is never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
Right?
Yeah. Like those two things really apply to everything that you just said there. I don't know how to make sense out of what is happening with the professional commentariat. And I've been kind of breaking the fourth wall, like, we tend to do. And I keep posting stuff saying, okay, you see what everybody's saying about this? This is not going to happen. Like everybody was saying on Monday or Tuesday, oh, Trump's going to nuke Iran. And I put up a tweet, and
is that the 8 p.m. thing?
Yeah, and so I pinned this tweet, and I said, it is not going to happen. And in a couple of days, you're all going to look ridiculous. Will any of you admit it? I'm going to put this here because I want to be able to come back to it. But the thing is that nobody revisits that. When they get it wrong, they just move on and they do another bad take. And some of these people are people that we're familiar with enough to know they're not insincere.
Right.
But yet it's like the joke about how, on Facebook, every AI video fools all the boomers. Like, you see people talking about that all the time. And some AI video will come out and people are like, man, this is going to kill on Facebook,
Totally.
But that's the feeling. It's like, I compared it the other day to, do you think that there are fish that sit there in the water and yell, it's a hook? Dude, it's a hook. Don't bite. And the other fish is looking back like, have another. Sure, I'm going for it. And then they go for it every freaking time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how to make sense out of it. I mean, do you have any feeling?
Well, I think one of the things I'm learning is that in like the commentariat class, there are definitely like rungs to the ladder. They're the elites, they're the kind of the sub elites, they're the kind of ham and eggers, and then they're the kind of like anonymous folks and weirdos like you and me, right? We certainly offer our fair share of commentary on X and on Substack and here on YouTube. But I grew up in the shadow of a college campus. This particular college campus had a Greek system, fraternities and sororities. And there's like this hierarchical ordering of the fraternities and the sororities, right? Everything from like, the kings and queens all the way down to the scrubs, right? And you have a couple of like alternative fraternities who are known for this particular thing, or some alternative sororities that are kind of known for this particular thing. Everybody kind of begrudgingly respects the kind of the weirdo the outliers. But in that mainstream, like there's the king and then there's the scrub at the bottom. And I'm disturbed to admit that I think the commentariat class functions in very much the same way as a college Greek system. And everybody wants to trade up. Everybody wants to be in, the front row, as it were, to use Chris Arnaud's lingo from X. And I can't always tell when someone is posting earnestly. Let scratch that. I can't always tell when the post or the tweet or the Substack, or the YouTube video is meant for the audience of people who log in and respond to it, or if the post or the video or the tweet is for their confreres,
meant to maintain the status of membership, kind of a thing.
Something like that, right? Like in other words, I'm not like that guy, or I'm not like those guys. Like, and I don't know. Does that at all strike a chord?
I mean,
with
it
you?
could. It's difficult to say, because when I do engage with some of these people and they engage back, they seem to really mean what they say. The ones that don't engage, who knows? Maybe they're too big, or I don't know. It's all very, very strange. I think part of it is something that I realized early on in my media career was, you can't trust people who take themselves too seriously when it comes to commentary on what's going on. These are the people who end up forgetting that the people who cover the news should not be the news. So they have all these feuds between, these little personality spats and all this kind of stuff. They're all vying for some kind of position within a perceived dominance hierarchy.
Yeah.
And they're taking themselves too seriously. And one of the attributes of that is posting with moral certitude your opinion on something, and then you end up being wrong, but you've given yourself no room to take it back. So you either just move on, or you don't address it, and you begin,
or you have to double down,
right,
triple down, right?
And so I think that the people that I tend to trust are the ones who hedge a little bit, who say, I'm not sure, but this is what I think I see happening. The people who have room, who leave themselves room to say later on, you know what, I got this one wrong.
Yeah. And that is probably the most genuine or moral standpoint, I think, with which to do this kind of work. But it's also the kind of thing that gets you piled on, right? Like, for instance, I have a profound respect for Ross Douthat, the New York Times columnist. He's a good guy. I think he's a really smart guy, and he is really circumspect. He's very clear, I think, on what he kind of believes. Like, it's not a mystery in that regard, but he has a tremendous amount of clout, I think, in part because he's willing to entertain things. He's willing to listen. He's willing to push back when he feels like he needs to push back. And look, he throws balls too, right?
Sure.
It's not all strikes. But he gets just pilloried by both, those people who would naturally care for him because he tends to be certainly right of center. He's a conservative. But and of course everybody if you really want to laugh, go on, like, he's the most gentlemanly of, columnists and pundits that we have. And you go on the New York Times under one of his columns, and it's like people want to kill him.
Right. And I actually think that's part of this disease, is when you reach a sufficient status and influence that you're getting that kind of feedback on everything that you do, you begin to kind of just have to turn down your receptiveness to feedback, right?
Have you had to do that at all?
Yeah.
Because I have a story.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Because, not every, I don't have a massive audience, but,
You're pretty,
but I've got 43,000 followers on X, and, and the thing is, so sometimes I'll post and I'll get nothing, or I'll get a couple of replies. Sometimes I get 300, 500, 1,000, 5,000 replies to something. And when that begins to happen, you can't deal with all of it. A lot of it's bullcrap. A lot of it's trolling. A lot of it's nasty right out of the gate. And so what you begin to do is, by nature, is sort of protective mechanism, you tend to engage only with two kinds of people: the people who agree with you, and you're like, hey, thanks. And then the people who are willing to disagree with you with a certain degree of civility. And that's it. Like, nobody else gets your attention at that point, because you'll waste your whole life. You'll get angry. You'll
Sure.
And like, I saw somebody tweet something today about, I don't understand why I got on the website that's an anger generating machine and then felt, sudden inexplicable anger, but that is the experience that happens when you're getting feedback at that level, and nobody's made for that.
Yeah, it's funny. I only have, a little bit over 10,000 followers on X, and even, and so my engagement is just by virtue of the algorithm, it's going to be much less than yours. But I with increasing frequency, I get like wild, unhinged feedback on some of these posts that I'll put that are, and me, like I
You're
mostly
not
post
provocative in the way that you post.
No. I jokingly say that I'm an earnest poster as much as possible. I say things that I believe, and I'm looking at things and I'm considering things, and I do my best to be circumspect. But you get these sort of wild things, like, just the other day, I posted something about, it was not political at all. I think it was about Homer. Okay. And what's wild, one second, let me shut this in. What's wild to me is that, like, oh, this is what you want to talk about when the guy
Right.
that you supported is like murdering Iranians?
Yeah, they can
and I'm like,
find a way for you to turn the most innocuous thing into
Right.
a character defect.
And Steve, you know me very well as anybody on the planet. I mean, how often do I post about Trump?
Almost
really.
never.
Like almost never.
Yeah.
It's not my bag.
Right.
Right. You know, like I will share things with you from time to time, like something that like he'll say that makes me laugh.
Mhm.
But honestly, but it's so weird. And you know,
No, you're way better than I am about being topically focused in what you're.
Which is why I have 10,000 followers.
Yeah.
And yet, no, you've been playing the game a lot longer than me, and you post great stuff. So I personally think that this is one of the effects of living in the digital Skinner box. I mean, I think this is why I spent, 20 minutes sort of telling you the story of BF Skinner and this sort of this built environment, like this built artificial environment with levers and buttons and a data collector on the side. And I can't help but see that all of us, again, to a greater or a lesser extent, all of us are being prodded and prompted in all of these kinds of ways. And it's great for me because I like to see what's going on, but I see what it does to people. And it makes them kind of digital monsters.
Well, I mean, people are not made to be exposed to this much information upon which they're supposed to have an opinion. The social imaginary, the caste system within the social imaginary is very much predicated upon moral grandstanding of whatever flavor. Everybody's got to be making their moral, outrageous, and you will see this if you pay attention to posts. News posts, there will often be a little line at the end of where is the outrage? Like they're really farming for you should be outraged about this thing. And that pump is constantly being primed. And so when you are a communicator at a high level and you're getting all this negative feedback, you have to create a kind of echo chamber just to preserve your own sanity.
Right.
But that insulates you though from fair criticism. A lot of these people who get attacked all the time, they just don't reply to anybody.
Yeah.
I have people I interact with on online who I know and who I have private correspondence with. They don't reply to me when I reply to them online.
Yeah.
Because I think that they just ignore all of it. And so, those things all have an effect. I think we are all subject to the whims of the algorithm in ways that we don't realize. If you are on any social media website, if you use any streaming media, if you do anything that has a digital component to it, you are being tweaked by the algorithm, whether you know it or not. There was a really, really interesting example of this that happened a week or so ago. I don't know what precipitated it, but there were two things that I know happened for sure. One is on X, they started using Grok for automatic translations. They were previously using some built-in Google Translate API or whatever. Yeah. They switched to Grok, and so now tweets that come up in any language show up in your language, right? So there was this weird thing that happened where a bunch of Japanese tweets went viral, and suddenly everybody on X who's American and Japanese is having this big cultural exchange program where they're talking about each other's countries and the respect that they have for each other.
It was precipitated by Trump making a joke about a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor with the Japanese prime minister sitting right next
to the change.
That's what. Yeah. Well, no. But actually, that's a good question. I don't know.
Because that was very important because we saw a lot of Japanese people say, which by the way, I did not expect at all, that Trump's joke about Pearl Harbor lifted their guilt. Like they have felt guilty for so long.
Yeah.
We're the ones who dropped atomic bombs on them, but they
I know. It was amazing.
have felt guilty over Pearl Harbor for so long, and making a joke means, in their system of honor and the way that they look at things, like we're treating them like equals and we can be friends. The guilt is gone. Let's just be partners, right?
All right. So take it back. So this automatic translator thing happens, and all of a sudden Americans and Japanese are encountering each other.
Yeah, and it's amazing that Japanese are like, we want to come over and see your big houses and try your barbecue. And the Americans are like, we love this stuff that you do. And it was this love fest for days. But on the meta level, when you back up, you're like, an algorithm change happened, and suddenly everyone's behavior is mapping to that change.
Wow.
And it's happening by the thousands and thousands and thousands. This isn't a small, you couldn't have shifts in the zeitgeist organically like this.
Right. That's amazing because it blows open the pass through, right? It blows open a bottleneck that was guarded by a priestly class of some sort, right? Yeah. Right? And so now all of a sudden, you have this, it's wide open and, wow, that's man, that's a wild thing. And like you said, it's just this one little small tweak.
And I think Nikita Beer, who I believe is the head of product for X and does a lot of these changes and announces them on the platform, I think what he said is a couple of Japanese tweets went viral, but because they were translated into English, people in America saw them and they started responding, and the algorithm adjusted to this interaction and then started serving up more and more of the same content to everybody who interacted with it. And so he says, within the system, it happened organically. They didn't make it happen on purpose. It was just the algorithm responded to people's behavior. But this goes back to us and our idea of, is the algorithm an egregore? Like what?
Yeah.
You know, are we driving it? Is it driving us? Like, you know, is it some weird synthesis of the two? We don't really know.
Right. You know, Rod mentioned in his diary, I think it was either this morning or yesterday. I'm going to read it for you real quick because I think it's really good. And he's quoting someone I follow on X. Her name is Bridget Fetisi. She's very funny. She's a comedian.
Yeah, I know she is.
But cultural commentator. She's pretty sharp. I like her a lot. And she says, you cannot reason a 23-year-old out of positions they were algorithmically radicalized into. You're not going to win them over by learning their slang and nodding along with their worst impulses. And then Rod makes this comment, and I think it's really good. He says, a friend who is a college professor texted to say that this is exactly his experience trying to teach this very online generation. It's, and this is the money quote, it's as if a chip has been put in their heads and nothing will change their minds. You know, and I want to say to Rod, and I will, I mean, we're friends. Rod, we do have that chip.
For the audience, this is Rod Dreher
heads.
that we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry, Rod Dreher. You know, we do have this chip implanted into our brains. It's called our phones. It's called social media, right? And, you know, one of my favorite cultural commentators, Mary Harrington, said the other day, somewhat jokingly, as she said, somewhat cheekily, she's a Brit after all, that, you know, the singularity is already here. And, you know, now, the sort of the technical definition of the singularity as named and exposited by Ray Kurzweil, I believe, is the sort of the, if I'm not mistaken, the physical merging of.
Yeah, well, he's a transhumanist, so his definition came out over a decade ago. People are talking about the singularity now in a slightly altered
different
way.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what what I'm getting at, right? So that, you know, so her sort of cheeky quote that, well, the singularity is already here. We've already merged with our machines. You know, I think there's something to be said for that. We are effectively then, maybe to sort of translate a little bit, we are effectively already transhumanists, and we have effectively created a new generation that is, you know, more machine than man, to quote Obi-Wan.
I want to bring up something here that, you know, if anybody out there is interested in really great social satire in this, which is, by the way, over a decade old at this point, there's a novel by an Australian author named Max Berry. It's called Machine Man. And it's about this scientist in the opening scene of the book. I haven't read it.
Yes.
I haven't read it in years, but it's such a perfect analogy here. The scientist who wakes up in the morning and can't find his phone. And because he can't find his phone, he can't check the weather. And because he can't check the weather, he can't figure out what he's supposed to wear. And he's going through this whole like crash out because without his phone, he doesn't have the information he needs to plan his day, right? And then he realizes, I must have left my phone in the lab last night because we were running this experiment. So he rushes into work. He goes into the lab. He sees his phone like single-mindedly, like I need my phone, and isn't paying attention to the fact that an active experiment is going on. Rushes into the lab and gets his, I think it's his leg that he starts off with, gets crushed in this vice because they're doing some test and he has to have his leg amputated, right? But he gets his phone, but he has to have his leg amputated.
Yeah.
So they give him a replacement leg, and it's a synthetic leg, and it's got one of those spring things on the bottom and everything. And he starts realizing, wow, this leg is better than my real leg. Like, but I can't have one really good cyborg leg and one human leg. I need both because I can't run with this. It's lopsided. So he orchestrates another accident. So he loses his other leg so that he can have two legs, so that now he can run faster and he can do all. And so
That's
throughout
great.
the course of the book, he basically finds this obsession of replacing his own parts with machine parts because they're better. But it all starts with the phone.
And focus like that hyper myopia. Got to go get my phone, because without my phone, I in essence don't know who and what I am and what I'm supposed to do.
And it's a very, very darkly funny and well done book.
Yeah.
But it predicted what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. I think this is deeply consequential, of course, for the rising generations. I've spent, the better part of 25 plus years now teaching in the classroom, and boy, it's different, and we've talked about this, of course, and, I won't belabor the point, but it is remarkable what this experiment without a control mechanism has concocted in the lab of our digital Skinner box. It's whatever's coming. I guess this is my fear, that whatever is coming, or maybe it's already here, but whatever is coming will not be forced upon us, right? Whatever is coming will be welcomed with open cyborg arms.
Yeah, 100%. Because it makes your life better, and you feel that you're like, I'm willing to make this trade,
Now, so I hear you, and I'm tracking with you, but just yesterday, this is you. I'm quoting you back to you,
Let's do it,
Mr. Skojic. You said on X, been reading offline today, doing some research. Pop on here occasionally to see what I've missed. And even limited continuous breaks from X make it pretty damn clear this entire site is hijacking your endocrine system the entire time you're on here. Break that down for me a little bit, because I saw it, immediately hit the like.
So I mean, it was interesting
like
because the research that I was doing was on the Manhattan Project. It was for something I'm thinking about writing.
Yeah.
And I found this old book that is very expensive, but I found a bootleg copy of it, and so I was reading it. I was actually reading it on my computer because it was an EPUB book.
Yeah,
it's called "The Day the Sun Rose Twice," and it was just this really detailed account of everything that went on leading up to the Trinity test, and then the fallout and how they studied it afterward, and all this kind of stuff. And it was a very slow-paced kind of read. It was not super fascinating, but I was interested in it because that's an interesting topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it downregulates you. So you're reading this and it slows you way, way down because the information is coming. There's a lot of detail. It's an old-fashioned style of writing. It was written decades ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I would read for like an hour, and then I would be like, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go bathroom, get some food, whatever. And then I'd pop on to see what's going on because we have an active war going on and I'm monitoring all this stuff. And immediately I could feel my emotions begin changing because everything, going back to the thing of, are you outraged about this? Like everything is polarized and primed to get you upset, to get you feeling something, because if you're feeling something, you're engaging. And if you're engaging, that's where the money is, right? So it's this endless manipulation. And so we both enter into this space knowing that this is true when we're monitoring, steeling ourselves, being critical consumers of media to the best of our ability. But, you can only resist so much. And so this image that you use all the time about spells, there really is a salience to this idea of falling under a spell and then having to snap out of it and be like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? This isn't me. We've seen that in countless books and movies, this thing of, like the good character falls under the spell of some evil sorcerer or sorceress, whatever. And the friends are like, this isn't you. You have to remember who you are. Like, this is a common trope. But I feel like we're all experiencing that now if and only if we have the self-awareness to even realize we're being manipulated, because if we don't, we're just going deeper and deeper and deeper under. And it's scary.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought too much about something popped into my head. In between my monitoring the situation, I teach and therefore reread old books, right? And this drives my wife nuts, but when I sign 2 chapters of the Iliad, or 3 cantos of Dante's Inferno, I reread it every time with the kids, and I've always done that.
You
I've
have
always
to,
thought
don't
that,
you? I mean,
you have to, because the level of detail, the magic in a different way, but the good stuff is in the details, right? And if you and of course you read a chapter and 3, 4, 5 days later, like, it's kind of gone.
yeah, and we
right?
have a lot of other information pushing stuff out
Right.
of, you have only so much RAM, so to speak.
Well, yeah, that's right. Right now, what's wonderful about rereading, though, is that I have all this stuff in deep storage, right? So when I'm rereading an old book, or even when I'm reading a new old book for me, I have this really high resolution garden that I've cultivated over the years that make things resonate and pop.
But it
I
has to
think,
be
in a way.
unlocked.
Correct. Right. So getting back to the point,
Yeah.
then, right, is that, like I said, in between monitoring, I'm always reading or rereading these old books, and they're totally analog, right? I mean, there's, when you pick up a book, there's one thing going on. And even in a complicated book that might have footnotes or end notes, like, that kind of adds a layer of complication. But I'm always in that driver's seat, right? I'm the one who has to sort of put my finger on the page, flip it back to the end, read the notes, go back here, and then reorient myself to this thing, which is fundamentally analog. It does one thing. And I'm realizing now that if I am at all sane, it is in part because I am compelled, because of my profession, to live a deeply non-digital life a lot. And it's funny, like, I'm teaching the Odyssey right now, both in person and online. If you're still interested, please sign up. But I know that I've got to do my prep, right? And so I'll put it off, and then I open up the book, and it takes you about, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to kind of, okay, I'm going to focus on this one thing singularly, and my phone is literally in the other room because I know myself. And after about 3, 4, 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm in this world, and it's beautiful, and it's challenging, and it's beautiful, and it's familiar in that kind of difficult way, but I wonder how much that is a kind of way that I'm regulating my autonomic
Well, it probably
system.
is, but that threshold is difficult to cross too.
It is
Every time, even though
I have to do it.
know that you will have that experience, it is difficult to disengage every time.
Right.
Yeah, I think about Spider-Man trying to pull off the Venom symbiote suit, and it's like,
that's right.
It makes him stronger, and it makes him have all these abilities that he doesn't otherwise have, and it's like a drug. It has an effect on his brain, and he has to, get it off because it's also killing him.
Right. So think about this, what this does for a person like me and a person like you, who, like, I have ideas. I feel compelled to share my ideas, and, and in my meat world, I've got at best 15, 16 people that are listening to me. Like, that's not nothing. That's pretty darn cool, honestly. But now I can send out a tweet and I can get 100 retweets and, several thousand, likes and interactions. It's like catnip.
And then you add money to it. I mean, I paid my rent with X this month with engagement, and it's like, that's a big deal when you're struggling to make ends meet. We're not making bucks off this podcast. We're doing this for the love of the game here.
For the love of the game, my friend.
And so it's like we both invest a lot of time in things that don't provide a lot of financial return. So when you start to add money to the equation, it's a pretty big deal. You'll keep going. You'll find reasons to go back.
And this is why, I think one of the great hazards of the game is audience capture, as you've been kind of hinting at from the get-go. I would guess, Steve, that you, with your media career and your familiarity with X and all the socials and Substack, like, you probably know how to jam it a little bit, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm known for bucking the audience. That's kind of, it has not served me well in the economic realm.
Yeah.
But I mean, I finished out my Catholic media career by constantly pushing back against an audience that I felt like they were adopting a tribal mentality that I couldn't get on board with, right? And so that was on several different topics, and so there's this thing that happens in me, and I think it's unique to my personality, where the more you tell me what it is that I have to be saying to you for you to be my audience, the more defiant I'm going to become. But
I've got a little bit of that.
It's hard. I don't think
myself.
everybody has that, and it's not always healthy in every context. But I'm like, don't tell me what to think. You donated money. That's great, but that doesn't buy my opinion. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
But audience capture is definitely real, and you can see this thing that I did worked. I should do that again. If you don't have scruples about that, you can very easily. I can say things that are somewhat superficial that I know will become popular, but there are also things that I actually think are true. Maybe I wouldn't have said it, or I wouldn't have said it quite that way if I didn't think it would get the engagement. But what I won't do is lie to get that audience response. That to me is unacceptable. And I think that's the line between authentic commentators and grifters. The grifters are the ones who will pander to you, who will overtly manipulate your emotions. And you see this. I mean, there's this thing that came out the other day, and it was the ecosystem of the largest accounts on X, by followers or by engagement.
And it was Nate Silver.
Well, but I mean, if you look, it's Elon Musk is at the top, and then the next guy is this Eric Daughtry dude, who is the epitome of conservative grifter. Every single thing that he posts uses the same formula. It's got the siren. It's got breaking.
Siren.
At the top. It's he's always doing emotional editorial within the news, where it's like, wow, Democrats were speechless. Like all these little comments that he throws in. That tells you how to feel and how to think about this information that he's presenting. It might not even be a big story. This guy's got over 100 million followers or something like that. I mean, it's outrageous. And every time it comes up, I look at that and I'm like, it is so patently obvious that you are manipulating everyone with every tweet. And it's exactly what his audience wants to hear. He's just throwing red meat. And man, that stuff drives me crazy. And by the way, in that top ecosystem, it's all conservative grifters.
Yeah.
It's Gunther Eagleman and Nick Sorter and all these guys, and it's like they all do the exact same formula to varying degrees. And they don't care about I don't even think they care about whether what they're reporting is true, as long as it confirms the biases of their audience.
Right. And I wonder, you and I have made our fair share of jokes about Facebook and boomers, and and I still maintain that I go on there from time to time to post things, like if I'm doing a course.
The engagement you get there is completely different than anywhere else.
It's bizarre, and it's weird. Like sometimes I'll you'll get replies to a post, but then it won't show up as a notification. I don't know.
The site itself is broken. Like the coding is so bad. It's so memory intensive. I'll go to reply to a comment and I type, and it takes like a second and a half before the keystroke actually registers on the screen. I mean, it's crazy how broken it is.
So what do you think is going to happen with X? Do you think X is just going to become Gen X Facebook?
I don't know. I mean, X is where everybody is. It's still the biggest. It's still growing. It's going to depend a lot, I think, on whether these algorithmic tweets that they're making are going to help. I mean, they posted something this morning saying they're killing 208 bots per minute or something like that. They are trying to use AI to filter the feeds so that the quality of the content you get is higher. They've done a number of things to try to demonetize people that are posting fake stuff. I mean, the reason why payouts have been so much higher is they freed up $500,000 in creator revenue sharing by getting rid of accounts that were posting fake AI videos as news and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the pool got bigger and it got distributed differently. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. There isn't another game. It is the only game in town,
Yeah.
you know, if you want information and you want it fast.
Yeah. All right. I want to change topics.
Okay.
Something that you love to monitor and I love to monitor, you're monitoring. Let's talk UAPs for a minute.
Okay.
And
let's.
in particular, I want to ask you about where you see things right now. But I saw just today that a 9th scientist has turned up dead that has some kind of connection to high-level intelligence.
We haven't talked about this on the show, have we?
We have not.
No.
So,
yeah,
okay,
so,
good.
Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we have to kind of set it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I started looking into this back in February, I think, because I just started noticing a weird pattern. There were 2 scientists that had gotten murdered. I'm going to look at my screen here.
Yeah, go ahead.
2 scientists that had gotten murdered a couple months apart. There was the guy at MIT who was, I think he was a nuclear scientist working on fusion, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. That's correct.
His name was Nuno Loureiro. He was killed on December 15th, 2025. There was another guy out in California, opposite coast, called Grillmare, who was also shot and killed February 16th, 2026.
In his home.
In his home.
Both of these people were murdered
and
in their homes.
I mean, they were killed by known problematic people, but at the same time, it seemed very random. There didn't seem to be any reason for these murders. And, you know, I noticed that both of them were working on stuff that's related potentially to the UAP topic, in the sense that, you know, any reverse engineering program needs to understand things like propulsion and needs to understand space and needs to understand fundamental physics and general relativity and all this stuff. And so the guy out in California was working on plasma physics and on the question of whether dark matter is even real and all this kind of stuff. So all of this stuff, I mean, it's very tentatively connected. These guys didn't know each other, but I was like, that's weird. You know, one is a data point, 2 is the beginning of a pattern. Right. And then 3, you know, it starts to get bigger. So I started to compile all these different people. Now, I want to say, this guy who they're now reporting as another one, just blah, 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 he died in 2023.
Okay.
So they're reporting it as though it's new. What's new is noticing the connection between him and the others.
Yeah. Which is not unusual. Just to play advocate here, it's not unusual. Like, for instance, a classic example is a serial murder case, right? You know, you've got all these murders, like, fine, one kind of triggers, one gets attention. And then as part of the investigation, you know, you reopen up these cold files. You realize, oh, wait a second, this is sort of imitating the same pattern, even though it was not seen as such or filed as such or categorized as such back then. You know, you can kind of go back and pick some of these things up and draw a larger pattern. So anyway,
I had started back in early to mid-February. Actually, it was around mid-February. I asked Grok to start, you know, I started feeding it these news stories. And I said, help me figure out if there's any connection between these guys. And surface level, by the way, if you use an AI, and Grok is, in my opinion, far and away the most objective when it comes to doing research, and it'll tell you what it doesn't know. It'll give you links to sources. It is far better when it comes to truth seeking than the others that are just going to lie to you if they think it'll make you happy. If they think it will make you happy. I don't think I said that right. And so at first, Grok was like, nah, there's nothing. And I was like, okay, put on your skeptical hat, pretend you're, you know, a gumshoe. Let's dig deeper. Let's not take the official stories. And so it started to begin noticing potential connections. So I went back to that old thread where I had already fed it a bunch of information today, and I sent it this new guy who was actually, you know, 3 years ago. And I said, how does this fit? Right. So it says this is the current public cluster, now widely reported as the 9. It centers on individuals with documented ties to NASA, JPL, which is NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, AFRL, LANL, I don't know what those are, plasma physics, infrared astronomy, advanced materials propulsion, or nuclear/space adjacent programs. I've listed them chronologically by the date. And so you go through. The new guy is Michael David Hicks, who was only 59. He worked for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a research scientist. He died in July of 2023 at his home in California. No cause of death was released. No autopsy record has been located despite requests. Nobody knows what happened, but he was connected. Now, what's interesting is he actually had a direct connection to one of the other guys, a guy named Frank Mywald, who was 61. 59, 61. You're not seeing a lot of guys dying at that age these days.
No.
You know, it's very early. He also worked for NASA JPL. They were colleagues. They knew each other. He died on July 4th, 2024 in Los Angeles. No public cause of death or autopsy. No statement from JPL. So these two guys worked together on NASA stuff, and they both died a year apart, almost to the day. It was definitely to the month. Both were young, and both no explanation whatsoever. So weird, right? We have Anthony Chavez, who's a former Los Alamos National Laboratory employee who disappeared on May 4th, 2025, while walking in New Mexico, never to be seen again. Monica Reza, who is age 60, an aerospace materials engineer, JPL director of materials, worked on other aerospace stuff, vanished on June 22nd, 2025, while walking near Mount Waterman, Angeles National Forest. She's a co-inventor of nickel-based superalloy for next-generation rocket engines. She also worked with General McCaslin, who has also disappeared. We'll get to him in a minute. She did, space stuff. I think she's the one who, when she disappeared, her family found several cell phones. She didn't just have one, which was interesting.
Because lots of people have several cell phones.
And they were all factory reset and left conspicuously at home. But she's been gone for a year almost, and nobody knows what happened to her. I'm going to actually skip ahead to McCaslin if I can find him on this list, because they knew each other. They worked together. Major General William Neal McCaslin, he was the kind of the beginning of people really starting to notice this pattern.
Yes.
68-year-old retired former commander of Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. For those who are not steeped in UAP lore, Wright-Patterson in Ohio is known as being the location where crashed UFOs allegedly are brought for study initially, when the government is the one that retrieves them.
Got it.
So it is widely rumored to be where those things go. He was also definitely read in on all the UAP programs. He was also read in on all the black SAP programs, the special access programs, the military, just straight up. Like, this guy knew all the secrets that you could know. He vanished in February of this year after walking out of his home in Albuquerque. He left his phone and glasses behind. He brought a .38 caliber pistol with him and then vanished. There's been no indication of foul play. The police and now the FBI, they've asked people for their Ring camera footage, security camera footage. Nobody sees him on anything. The guy is just gone. And his wife said the 911 call was released, and it was very interesting because, number one, she didn't sound particularly concerned, which was weird. She definitely sounded concerned, but she didn't sound like she was freaking out. And she said, there are indications that he may not have intended to be found. And this is what she says in this call. So did he disappear himself? Did somebody take him? Was it a foreign adversary? Nobody knows, right? And so we can go through, there's a whole bunch more people on this list, but they're all scientists who all work on things that relate to space, to energy, to nuclear power, to propulsion, to rocket systems, to astronomy. And so this pattern is very odd.
Yeah, we're firmly in the world of the portion of the UAP story that has to do with technology and reverse engineering, right?
Right. And Bob Lazar is suddenly, back in the news again for the first time. So for people who aren't familiar with Bob Lazar, he was really the first UFO whistleblower to gain wide notoriety. And what happened is, according to Bob, he was hired as a physicist, as a pretty young guy, at Los Alamos. This happened sort of circumstantially. He met Edward Teller, who is, one of the fathers of the hydrogen bomb. The Teller-Ulam equation is the thing that gave rise to the hydrogen bomb. So he went to a talk by Edward Teller They had a conversation afterwards. Allegedly, Teller referred him for a job with this defense contractor. He goes and interviews with them. They say, we actually have a project we want you to work on that's not the job you think you're applying for.
No.
They put him on a bus with blacked out windows, and they take him from, there's a plane that takes him from Vegas to Area 51, which is in the Nevada desert. He was, by the way, he was the person who made Area 51 known to the public.
Okay, interesting.
Like that started with his testimony, but we'll get to that in a second. So, allegedly gets on this school bus with blacked out windows with, and they take him out to this facility out in the middle of the desert, past Area 51, past Papoose Lake, which is this old dry lake bed. And he's brought into this weird hangar that's built into the side of a mountain. And there's UFOs in there. And they basically say, we want to reverse engineer the propulsion system for this. Your predecessor died doing the research. There was an explosion. That's all he knows.
Wow.
He's paired up with one guy, a lab partner who's been there longer. Guy's name is Barry, whose job it is to show him the ropes, but everything is compartmentalized to an extreme degree. So he's working only on the reactor that powers this craft, trying to figure out how does it work, what makes it work. There's other guys working on metallurgy. They're not allowed to talk to each other. There's other, so he has repeatedly said, if we could have all interacted with each other, we probably could have
got
figured
into a
something
room
out.
together. Yeah.
But they were,
totally.
for the purposes of secrecy, keeping us all very, very separate. He said they also fed him a bunch of information, binders full of stuff about where the craft supposedly came from and what they know and everything. And he said, I don't know if any of it was true. It was supposedly this thing was from Zeta Reticuli and all these things. He's like, this could have been passage material, and if you're familiar, as you are, with the CIA.
Yeah, explain that.
Passage material is something that intelligence agencies will incorporate an intentionally seeded fabrication, seeded, S-E-E-D-E-D, fabrication within true classified information, so that if the information leaks, they can trace it back to the person they gave that seed to. So that's passage material. So
it's tagging it,
tagging it with something obviously false that they can identify. We only release that information to these people.
To you, yeah.
So he's like, I don't know if any of it's real. But what ends up happening is he's working there for about 6 months, and he notices, he doesn't get, it's not a job that he goes to every day. Like, they tell him when to come in.
Got it.
And so he notices they're not calling him in, and they're behaving strangely towards him. And he starts thinking, this is super secretive. I've been warned about all this stuff. I know too much. Maybe I'm in trouble. Like, maybe my life is in danger because this is crazy stuff, and he talks about the fact that this craft appears to be powered by an anti-gravity field. He describes this reactor as having a force that is akin to, putting like poles of magnets together when they push away. He's like, he says it does that to biology. Like, magnets do it to each other. He's like, I couldn't put my hands. There was an elastic field, and when I pushed, like, it can only push so far, and it was repelling me. He said it was a force field, and that doesn't exist in physics as we know it. And so we were supposed to try to figure out how the hell does this thing work, because that's what's making this craft work. And he said there's a huge UFO, 52 feet wide flying saucer sitting in this hangar in the desert, and it had an American flag on it, that they had put on it and everything. But they told him climb underneath because it's hovering, even in its latent state. It's just hovering above the floor.
So it's not on peg legs or anything.
And so he says that he was worried about going under it. He said because if it was really gravity, then the weight of the craft, even if it's hovering, should be displaced in a way that would crush your hand if you put it under there. He's like, I could run my hand under it and there was nothing. He's like, so I don't even know if gravity is the right word, but it was using some sort of repelling field. And it was our job to try to figure out how does this work? Can we use it? Can we use it in our own aircraft? So he gets to this point where he's starting to get worried. My life is in danger. I know too much. And he starts to skis out. So the first thing that he does is he saw a flight schedule on somebody's desk for test flights, because apparently they were taking this thing out at night and flying it. They could figure out how to make it they could turn it on. They just didn't know how it worked. So imagine, you're Victorian England and somebody leaves you a Tesla Cybertruck. Like, you can, you can push the buttons, but you have no idea, how the technology actually works.
Yeah.
And so he brought a couple of his friends out, they went out to the desert according to the schedule, and they saw this thing flying around, and it was moving in ways that aircraft can't move, and they went out a couple of times, and then they finally got caught.
Joyriding the UFO.
Yeah, well, they were just watching the test flights,
watching,
you know.
yeah.
But I mean, somebody brought a camcorder out and recorded it, so he has eyewitnesses that have now gone on camera in this latest documentary. The reason he's back in the news is because a new documentary about him came out. And so what ended up happening is he goes on with the local Las Vegas news channel, first anonymously. He's filmed in silhouette. And he goes on this channel and basically says, he says, my name is Dennis, which was a poke at his superior because his superior's name was Dennis.
That's funny.
And he reveals this program that he's been brought in on that he didn't know anything about beforehand, blah, 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 right? And then he ends up, I don't remember why, he comes out later with more information with his face on camera, with his real name. This all happens in 1989. So this is a long time ago. It turns out what he finds out later is that the reason why they were acting strangely towards him is because when you're operating at that level of clearance, they tap your phones, they do everything. They figured out his wife was having an affair. And they thought if he finds out she's having an affair, he could become emotionally unstable, and emotionally unstable people aren't safe in these environments. And so, you know, he did this as a self-protective mechanism of, if I come out publicly and I say this stuff, then there's no point in them trying to kill me for knowing too much, basically.
Got it.
As it turns out, he was wrong about the reasons for it. You know, of course, he doesn't, you know, he loses the job and has all these problems that come from it. And of course, you know, he tries to claim educational credentials that can no longer be verified because the schools say he never went there. The government says he never worked at Los Alamos, but the reporter, George Knapp, who's working at the Las Vegas news channel, he's like, we found a phone book with his name in the phone book. It's right here, you know. And so there's this constant battle over, was he really there? Wasn't he? Is he a fraud? Isn't he? But this guy, I don't know. He's told the same story for 35 years. Yeah. He's gained nothing from it. He's not making money off of it. He doesn't seem to enjoy the attention. You know, but he kind of brought a lot of this to public awareness. And there have been a lot of things that he's said that over time have been verified as actually that was true. And nobody was talking about it when he was talking about it. And now it's coming out with all this kind of stuff. Go ahead. You have a question.
So what I find curious about this stuff, as you said, you know, this came out, Bob Lazar came out in 89, right? So this is a long time ago. I mean, you and I were pups at that point. As I'm hearing you say this story, hovering, if you will, under and around and over this story is, you know, the incredible, right? And the question that I think everyone has when they hear a story like this is, what's real? And I know that, you know, this is the most simple, almost the most important question you can always ask yourself, right? Is what is real? And I'm hearing you tell us this story about Bob Lazar and these scientists who are being disappeared. Something, you know, we don't know what it is. You and I are not pretending to know the facts, of course, beyond what you've just reported. But it's eerily similar to the experience that you and I were talking about with X and social media. You know, there's this flood of information. You don't know what to trust. There's no ombudsman like we were talking about earlier, which I talked about earlier. You know, but what kind of connection can we draw to this re-emergence of the UAP story? And to be very clear, especially for the younger people in the audience, this is not what was talked about when, you know, in the 90s or the early 2000s. Like, UAP stuff was totally crazy conspiracy theory stuff.
Well, there was a years-long PSYOP called Project Blue Book that was created to investigate primarily false claims so that they could, again, flood the zone with stories of we debunked, right? Because it was meant to cover up for a lot of the stuff that they didn't want to come out.
Right. So my question to you is, like, why now? Like, why has this stuff emerged in really spectacular fashion, really in the last 4 or 5 years.
So there's been a lot of talk about that. I don't know that there's one definitive answer.
Okay.
There does seem to be. So there is a timeline, though, that I can trace. I was really interested in this stuff when I was a kid. When I was in like 6th grade, I was reading books about it and everything.
Yeah.
And then I kind of freaked myself out because I read some stuff that was scary, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go down this road.
Like abduction stuff?
Yeah, abduction stuff. I was reading
yeah.
Whitley Strieber's stuff, who I haven't read since. I should probably revisit it and see what I think about it now.
I'd be
but his
curious
book
to see what you say on
Communion
that.
it felt, I mean, again, now this is, I don't want to feed this group, but it felt demonic to me. And I was like, I am getting the major creeps reading this story. I don't like it. I don't know if it's true, but something about it feels bad, and I don't know what it is, right? So I remember I dropped the book and I never picked it up again, brought it back to the library, and I stayed out of the topic for years. And then what happened is in 2017, New York Times story came out.
Yeah.
And it featured Lou Elizondo, who's this guy who was basically running a UFO task force in the Pentagon. Goes under different names. First it was OSAP, then it was ATIP. There's all this controversy. And every one of these guys, by the way, when they come out, a disinformation campaign begins saying they didn't really work there. They don't really know this stuff. But then there's always contradicting reports, because Senator Harry Reid was the one who funded it. He issued a letter before he died saying Lou Elizondo absolutely worked there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But he came out as a whistleblower because he said, there is a program inside the government that is retrieving these things, whatever they are, wherever they're from, and trying to reverse engineer them, and Congress is funding them, and they don't know that they're funding them because these are black programs. They're off the books, and the American public and the Congress that they elect has the right to know what's going on, what they're funding, the fact that these things are in our airspace and they're completely operating with impunity. It's a national security threat. Even if you think that they're just a human foreign actor, they are operating in our airspace. And this guy's Elizondo is a former military guy, counterterrorism, all this stuff. He wound up kind of getting pulled into this world. He wasn't pursuing it.
Yeah.
He got assigned to do this job. And he wrote a whole book about it called Imminent. We can link that in the show notes, about his experiences working at the Pentagon and what happened. But that story came with a couple of declassified videos from military pilots of them trying to chase down UFOs that they can't figure out what the heck they're doing. Like the movement is too fast. They're rotating in midair. They're doing all these weird things that just physics, can't do. So this kind of physics as we understand it. So kind of rips the lid off, right? And after Lou comes forward, more and more people start coming forward. Jeremy Corbell does, he's a filmmaker, and he does a documentary on Bob Lazar in 2018 that kind of was pretty popular. That was one of the things that pulled me in deeper when I watched that. First time I'd ever heard about Bob Lazar was 2018, 2019. So that comes out. Bob Lazar ends up going on Joe Rogan because of this documentary. To this day, the most watched Joe Rogan episode in the history of the show, and it's the biggest podcast on the planet, right? So,
which is really saying something.
Yeah, and Rogan just had Bob Lazar on again last week because of the new documentary, and he said, to this day, it is still like the most watched show. Like nothing even comes close. So a lot of interest in that, right? So Bob Lazar goes on there. Next thing you know, Lieutenant Commander David Fravor goes on there, and he was the head of the Black Aces FA-18 squadron that had the Nimitz encounter off the coast of San Diego in 2004, where they were sent to investigate, and that's where you get the Tic Tac UFO from. And he tried to engage with it with his fighter jet, and the thing took off at a speed that was incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Showed up 60 miles later at his classified cap point, and he's like, there's no way. Like, it knew where I was going, and it went there in an instant, like. So you have this guy's Top Gun, like 4,000 combat hours of flight. These are the guys we're trusting with, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of military hardware. They go through extreme psychological testing, and they're saying, look, all I know is I know what flight characteristics look like. I know what planes are capable of. This stuff isn't it. It's something else, right? So this all kind of builds from 2017. It just builds and builds and builds, and more people start coming out. Then in 2021, we start having congressional hearings with whistleblowers, most of them military, some of them military intelligence, and they're saying, we found evidence of these programs, and so there's a whole list of these whistleblowers, and it keeps growing. And so it's like this thing is getting pried open. At the same time, you also have everybody's got a cell phone camera now, right?
Right.
So you've got pilots filming stuff from airplanes on their cell phone cameras, even in military aircraft. You've got guys on the deck of the USS Omaha filming the combat ops deck where they're tracking objects on radar and they're filming the radar screen, and then they show the camera and the thing is a UFO and it goes under the water, right? Like, and so
things don't do that.
Yeah. So I think that what's happening is you're having a convergence of the problem that new forms of technology in terms of communication and media present, plus an upswelling of urgency from inside the government of this has been going on for 80 years. People have been hurt or killed trying to keep this stuff secret. We are funding this. The Pentagon never passes an audit. There's trillions of dollars. We don't know where they went. There are black programs that clearly are being funded by this, but what are they? So it's all kind of coalescing at the same time. And then you had, the thing that I think we talked about on a previous episode where Obama came out and said aliens were real, and then he tried to walk it back. And then Trump comes out the next day and says he shouldn't have said that. He's sharing classified information, which is like, that's not saying it's not true. Right. That's saying it's classified. Then Trump says he's going to disclose. And you've got a core constituency, particularly within the House of Representatives, but also in the Senate, that are now pushing to try to get this stuff to come out. So it's very, very interesting. I don't know how much is organic, how much is inorganic. It definitely is all very interconnected, and there's a lot of fighting, over what's true and what's not. The disinformation zone on this stuff is very thick.
Yeah. Very foggy.
Very foggy. But then you've got guys like Eric Weinstein, who is a brilliant mathematician and physicist, who says, I do not believe, he's like, I have never seen a shred of hard scientific evidence for this, but I cannot believe you can train hundreds of people at Marlon Brando. Just had a brain fart. Levels of sincerity to all be telling stories that match with one another, even though they don't know each other. He's like, I've talked to these people. There is something real going on here. I just don't know what it is or why I can't see it. And then why are there no physicists working on it? Because I know all the top physicists and none of them are. So are we even trying to solve this problem? And this leads to my bigger conspiracy theory about physics and AI and all that stuff, which I've talked about. I don't know if we want to talk about it here, but basically, David Grush, who's one of the military intelligence whistleblowers, who was tasked with investigating this from the inside, was threatened, brought that to the Inspector General of the intelligence community. His report was found credible and urgent. It's still under investigation, but he interviewed 40 witnesses who are parts of these programs. And he's like, there's something real here. This is something that's really going on. And they're doing everything they can to keep it secret, right? So you have this apparatus of UFO secrecy. And Grush said that the Manhattan Project guys were the ones who initially started this, and that they mapped that secrecy of the Manhattan Project onto the UFO program. Same exact protocol.
Correct. Yeah.
So you have that. You have Eric Weinstein, among others, saying physics has been intentionally dead-ended. I don't know why. We're doing string theory and quantized gravity, and none of this stuff is going anywhere. Like, for 40 years, it's been the only game in town. You can't be a theoretical physicist anymore and have a career. Like, we're acting like we've reached the end of physics, and we clearly haven't.
Right.
But something is going on. Then you have Mark Andreessen, who goes to the White House a year or two ago, and he's there to talk about AI and funding AI startups. And he's told by the Biden administration, don't bother. And he's like, what do you mean don't bother? And they said, we're not going to allow AI to exist outside the hands of 2 or 3 companies that we're basically going to control. He's like, you can't. It's math. How do you stop math? And they said, we classified entire branches of physics during the Cold War and pulled them out of the research community. We can do the same thing with AI.
I mean, that just boggles the mind. I know maybe people in the audience have even heard versions of this story already told out loud, but I mean, that paints a picture of, the military industrial complex in such a profoundly powerful light.
Yes.
That they can do something like this, pull it off. And so I guess, that's one thing. But one of our favorite themes here, Steve, is, signal and noise. And so I hear a lot of noise. I follow, a third of what you follow in terms of monitoring this particular situation. And I hear a lot of things. It raises my eyebrows. I'm like, well, that's really weird. That doesn't check out. Or like, my gosh, what would it look like for this to formalize into some kind of signal? And I want to embed this question in the larger question about X, social media, monitoring the situation, Iran, what's really going on. There seems to be some kind of confluence between these seemingly disparate stories.
I feel like we found a bunker in the mountains while we were out on a hike, and it's clearly a government facility, and it's got a perimeter fence, and there's something weird going on there, but we're like scratching at the edges. We don't know. Patterns tell stories, but so do the gaps in patterns, the things that are missing,
That's good.
the elephant in the room. And when you see enough pieces of a puzzle and they're all aligned around empty space, something is in that empty space. And I think you and I, one of the biggest things we're trying to do with this, and I don't even know if that's what we knew we were trying to do, is to figure out what's in that space, what is in that gap in the Mobius strip.
That's right.
And so, like, for me, when I look at, UFO secrecy ties to whatever's going on with physics, ties to whatever's going on with AI, what that tells me is they figured out something, probably in the 50s, that scared the pants off of them. And they decided, we're burying this because if we figure this out, something really bad is going to happen. If we allow people to know what we discovered, bad things will follow.
So I'm curious about that. Yeah, I'm tracking with you. I'm curious about that. The get out of jail free card that the military had from, 1945 until like now, formally, 1945 to 1989 was the threat of Soviet communism in the Cold War. Right? This is why I'm very loath to use words like phrases like existential threats. And I'm not trying to downplay the existential threat of the Soviet Union in its heyday. It absolutely was, and I'm not going to, I'm in no way trying to rewrite that particular history. But when you've got, I think the Soviets got nuclear power in 49.
I don't know the year.
It was a couple of year gap between when we had, of course, certainly that was spied and smuggled and given to the Soviets through agents and double agents. But, the Soviet threat was real. I don't think people were wrong to take that threat seriously. But when you are under duress, the temptation to cut corners and the temptation to create secrets is almost unsurmountable. But if I'm understanding your stories correctly, and if I'm putting them in a correct frame, maybe there are other frames, but if I'm going to put them in this frame, it would appear that the Cold War has never ended, that the apparatus that was erected to defeat Soviet communism is too big to put to bed. It reminds me of the way that, General Motors was too big to fail. Like this apparatus is too big to stop. And even if we wanted to stop it, like, where's the off switch?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm guessing you're hearing me, and you're hearing the echoes of the arms race to AGI. It's eerily similar. That if you can contextualize the race to AGI, not here in the Soviet threat, but in the communist China threat, I wonder if we're really just talking about the same story, actually.
Well, I mean, it does feel like it's versions of the same story over and over again. I mean, you go back and you read, like, this stuff I'm reading about the Manhattan Project. I mean, man, it was hairy. Like, they did not know for sure a lot of the things that they needed to know to do this safely, but they were rushing.
Yeah, it's almost a miracle that it. Two things. It's a miracle that it worked, and I'm, me. I'm like kind of using miracle for real there, but but it's a miracle that it didn't blow up, and again, literally blow up.
And they debated this stuff. I mean, they first were like, is it going to, is splitting one atom going to split every atom around it? And the atmosphere is going to catch fire. And, they were debating over this stuff amongst themselves.
And they didn't know until after they made the experiment.
They didn't know for sure. I mean, they did a lot of arguing and calculations, and they figured out, it would take a reaction mass that would be exponentially bigger than anything we're going to do to be able to pull that off. And but they didn't know how far, the radioactive fallout was going to spread, and they did simulations, but they can only do so much without the real thing. I mean, until the real thing happened, they just didn't have the data that they needed. And then even when it did happen, there was stuff that they missed. There were people living within range of the fallout that they weren't on the map, and they didn't know they were there. And then,
right.
And so a lot of this stuff didn't get discovered until later, and they just kind of buried a lot of that stuff.
Well, not kind of buried. It absolutely was buried.
Well, I mean, it's not so buried that it doesn't show up in the books that are about it now. But I mean, they hid it from public awareness.
Yeah,
back in the 60s. And here's the thing too, again, you and I both have this thing where we know conspiracies happen, but we're allergic to conspiracy theorizing because it becomes this unfalsifiable chain of whatever I can imagine is probably the real thing, right?
Right.
But I mean, you go back and you look at the day of the Trinity test was July 16th, 1945. And it was so bright. I mean, it was seen in 3 different states. It shattered windows, 50 miles away or whatever it was. Like it was, and this was, I mean, it wasn't the smaller bomb. They had 2 bombs. The little man was a uranium bomb, and Fat Boy was a plutonium bomb. And that was the one they tested at Trinity. They knew the uranium bomb would work, but because of the different trigger mechanism for the plutonium bomb, they weren't sure if it was even going to work. So that was the one that they tested, and it had the bigger yield. It was but it was still only 20,000 tons of TNT equivalent. But so they put out a story in the 2 local newspapers the next day saying that there was an ammunition dump out in the desert in a remote area that got blown up, and that was what people saw and heard, and that's all it was, and no big deal.
Nothing to see here, Steve.
Nothing to see
here. Right.
But it's like, this is from the Manhattan Project on was when the secrets got so big the government started lying to us about it. And feeling that it was perfectly within, their right to do so because this is too secret. We can't let it out. We can't let our enemies know what we're doing.
And the scale of it is just so much more deeply consequential. The scale of the military and the scale of the government prior to roughly 1900. The federal government was tiny.
And yet they still spent billions of dollars on this project and shipped thousands of scientists out into the middle of nowhere. And
no. I mean, look, my refrain, right? All the bodies are buried in the mid-century.
Yeah.
Los Alamos is really what I'm always talking about, right?
We learned how to harness fundamental forces of the universe. Like, that cannot be overstated. And by the way,
no big deal.
If you're listening to this and you have never heard of Born Secret, Google Born Secret. There are scientific equations that are illegal for you to write down, even if you figure them out on your own, because they are considered nuclear secrets. It's based off the 1917 Espionage Act and the 1946 and 1954 Atomic Energy Acts, and combined together, if you share nuclear physics, even without realizing you're doing something wrong because you're just a student and you figured something out, it's a federal crime. And it's actually a capital offense. That is an option that you could be executed for that. So to this day, physicists are constrained in sharing math that teaches people how to fundamentally alter the laws of the universe, or to exploit the laws of the universe. So this is big stuff.
Yeah, it's big stuff. All right. So now for our final act here, and this is something that you teed me up with, but I do think that this is the right time to bring it up. One of our favorite follows on X is the great Walter Kern.
Yes.
And Walter Kern is a novelist and a screenwriter. He wrote Up in the Air.
Journalist, too. Right?
And a journalist, right? And he is probably my favorite guy on X. And
he's the only guy more cryptic than you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe like, yeah. I mean, if I could only aspire at some point in my life to be Walter Kern, that would certainly be it. But I love Walter because he's an odd thinker, right? He is very uncategorizable in many respects. He's not a kind of classic pundit guy.
He's heterodox across the board.
Yeah, across the board. That's good. You said it more efficiently than I can. So, but he posted something on X yesterday or the day before that caught both of our eyes independently, and we both retweeted it within 15 minutes of one another.
Do you have it?
I don't have it handy.
I do.
Okay, good.
So this is what he said. Actually, I wonder if I could.
There's an original post, and then
I don't know if I can share my screen. Let me see if I can share it. It's going to be an experiment.
Careful.
Let's see. All right. So can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, so what I think is happening in the media space is that high profile narratives of intrigue, etc., obviously pushed are composed, LLM style, of parts of earlier narratives lodged in the collective mind. The new scripts are probabilistic syntheses of their elements. Luigi Mangione, the guy who who assassinated the United Health Insurance guy, the CEO. He's been talking about him for a while as sort of a weirdly created character. He says Luigi combines JFK shooting, we have footage of the crime, Unabomber stuff, he's against the establishment and wrote a manifesto, Charles Manson stuff, girls fall under his spell, and so on. Charlie Kirk mystery built with the same structure, with different elements. Disappearance of that newscaster lady's mom in Arizona, it's Nancy Guthrie, right?
Yep.
Is Lindbergh baby case, only it's an elder. Weak production, though, canceled. Even the anti-war movement going on now is a pastiche of Vietnam-era tropes with Trump as Nixon, impeach him, and the leaders of Iran as misunderstood freedom fighters a la Ho Chi Minh. This is your world now. Don't be mistaken. And don't think I'm saying everything is fake or that we live in a big-ass simulation. Real events can be molded through this process into what I'll call large language media.
So good.
The tell is their strange halo of familiarity of having been assembled from pre-existing units as it is with AI written prose. Got it?
So good.
So that's our tweet from Walter.
So I want you to think out loud with me about really a lot of the things that we've been talking for now almost, over an hour and a half. He's really talking about narrative formation and storytelling. And that caveat he puts, he's not saying that this is a simulation or that this is quote unquote fake, but rather real things can be framed and lit and composed in such a way that does some kind of work on the viewer / consumer.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think he's proposing something slightly more radical than that. I think he is saying some of this stuff is scripted. It's not authentic at all. Some is not authentic at all.
Well, in other words, Luigi's real. Like, he really did kill the CEO of United Healthcare. He really did. Well, he published a manifesto. Okay, so that's real. It's not as if that didn't happen, right?
I mean, I wish I was clearer on what Walter has been hitting that one for so long.
Yeah.
And he keeps predicting which way the story is going to go in the news, and then it does. Yeah. And so from the beginning, he's been saying something feels heavily scripted about this. So what level of reality that lands on, I don't know. I wish I was 100% sure he's not saying this isn't a fabricated thing. I mean, obviously the guy got killed. But I don't know. Like, this is what I find so interesting about this is how can you take something real and manipulate it to a degree that it follows a script? Because there are a lot of forces and processes, and there's public opinion, and there's all this stuff. So how do you Truman Show manage something if you don't have total control over the thing?
Well, let me try. Maybe not as a full explanation, but as a thought experiment to help us grok what Walter is laying out for us here. Have you ever been to an event that you later saw on the news
Yes.
right? So we can all intellectually, conceive of like, okay, so I went to this football game.
I think March for
And-
Life is something a lot of people have done that.
This is great. Okay, yeah, go ahead. To tell
Well,
that.
just
What
the
do you
March
mean?
for Life. I mean, a lot of our audience is probably, religious, conservative,
Yeah,
Christian.
yeah.
And so anybody who's ever been in the March for Life knows how vastly underreported it is, how they try to downplay the number of people who are there. You're there and you can see it's hundreds of thousands of people,
Right.
and
Right.
then they act like it's 40,000 people or whatever, and they only
Or
show
not even, yeah.
they only show the protesters and they don't show the
Right.
actual marchers and all this kind of stuff.
Right. So you can see that kind of delta between like the thing that you were there in person, like in the flesh, like you saw this thing happen, and then you see the way that it gets cut up, reframed, composed, lit, backdropped, voiceovered in such a way that it tells a decidedly different story. And I wonder if what Walter is getting at is that because we are, as I said earlier, we're already in the singularity. We experience the singularity as a kind of personal home movie. And I think this is what makes, for instance, books different from YouTube, TV, film, etc. Right?
Because it's not interactive.
And it's I mean it's literally mediated, right? Not through squiggly lines on a white page with black writing.
Is what I mean. Like it's not manipulated by the algorithm. It is what it is. You have the text and it's in front of you.
Right.
And you read it and you interpret it.
Right.
But it's like, it's not coming to you because you liked this other thing or.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you can add up a bunch of little bitty small stories to tell a larger story. You can take a story that really means A, but you can make it mean B and sort of stack that in such a way because, with the infinite scroll and autoplay, you can very much form a surreality, an alternate reality. So again, I don't think he's saying that it's not real, therefore, but we experience it as if it were real.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's the power of it. And maybe because he's a storyteller by trade, he's used to making things up. Again,
right.
Just
and stories follow certain narrative patterns,
logic, necessity, etc.
Yeah. It's, I always feel like there's at least 20 to 30% more than what Walter is saying that he knows. There are things that he knows. I mean, I think about going back to what we were just talking about with AI, it's like, we're not going to get the versions of AI available to the public that the government has access to. Like
ours are nerfed.
Like I don't care that, Mark Andreessen had that meeting with the Biden administration. I don't think the Trump administration is going to be any different.
No,
if you have AIs that are capable of solving these physics equations that they've kept under lock and key, we don't need that in the hands of the next Ted Kaczynski, right? Figuring out how to make a nuke at home or whatever, or whatever else it can figure out. But there's more to that. Like, what if those AIs, what if those frontier models that have all this power could also be used to create and orchestrate this version of the Truman Show, Yeah. I mean, we already know that we're using them in military applications. They're saying that the reason why the early days of the Iran campaign were so effective is because the AI was making targeting, like we were just able to target things in a way we never could before.
Yeah.
And so we don't really know. And, we've got this story that we didn't even get to talk about, which was one of the things I meant to mention in the beginning about Claude Mythos. This new model of Claude that Anthropic is saying they're not even going to release because it's too dangerous, because it's figuring out how to hack its way out of a sandbox. It's figuring out how to exploit decades-old vulnerabilities in secure software platforms that no hacker has ever found. And I've been looking into that. There's some skepticism. There's a lot of fear around it. I mean, they actually are starting an organization called Glasswing, or project called Glasswing, that's designed
what does that mean?
To bring a bunch of tech companies together to start looking at how do we deal with the fact that we're creating stuff that can do these things.
Okay. Well, let's do it. We've got a few minutes here,
okay.
And I want to do the Claude story because I do think it's important that this get appended to this larger conversation that we've had today. how do you appreciate this so-called mythos thing? First of all, so go.
Well, I mean, I think the difficult thing is, you and I are, in our approach to different media stories, I would say that we are each kind of a polymath in the sense that, we have a decent amount of knowledge about a broad array of subjects, but we're not experts on most
Correct.
of those subjects. It allows us to go wide, not deep, which is good for monitoring. I don't have the experience of somebody who's been doing cybersecurity for 20 years, and some of those people are saying, you know what, this isn't that big of a deal. But I'm seeing other people who've worked in cybersecurity for a really long time and are working at cybersecurity companies saying, no, it actually is a really big deal, because the fact that this exists, right now means that it can become an offensive weapon in the hands of the wrong people. These vulnerabilities, in these long-standing, extremely secure and widely adopted softwares and protocols that are out there, one of these vulnerabilities was 27 years old and nobody ever found it. Another one was 16 years old and nobody ever found it. These pieces of software have gone through millions of tests looking for bugs. They did not find the vulnerabilities that Mythos found like in an afternoon. And it has to do with compute power, with scale, with context, with pattern recognition. It can just do things that a human hacking mind can't do.
Just can't do. It would be dumb luck. It literally would be dumb luck.
Yeah, it's just, you're just massively scaling up what a human brain can do, and you apply that to a problem, of things created by human minds, and it finds flaws. This is not far-fetched to me at all. But what I don't know what to do with is how to separate the hype around this from the actual threat that exists. Because there's a ton of people that are invested in saying, oh my God, the world just changed. You don't understand what happened. Read this again, all this kind of crap.
And in this, like, this is, I can't turn it off. I'm allergic to these archons, like Dario and Sam. I really am. And, I see Dario again, sort of putting himself forward as like, he's like the good guy of AI. And he's like, I just don't know how you can take him at face value.
He strikes me as C.S. Lewis's moral busybody tyrant. The worst kind of tyranny is the tyranny of those who believe morally that they're doing what's in your best interest.
Man, that's really good.
That's what effective altruism is.
Yeah, no, I know. Right. And it's baked into this whole thing. I mean, there are a few, the effective altruism, this sort of au courant sort of personal philosophy that a large number of engineers in Silicon Valley kind of operate under. You can't, it's almost impossible to separate this project out from its effective altruist bed, the soil bed out of which this is being grown.
Yeah. And when you combine that with questionable ethics and going back to what we talked about earlier, the people who take the bait every time that some histrionic analysis of what's really going on in real politics or whatever, like it just becomes this confounding issue where the people who have all the power in the most advanced technological systems that are now starting to run more and more things have a very untrustworthy system of ethics and beliefs and credulity behind their worldview that they're using to map onto inform this. And it's interesting because I watched this podcast with Elon Musk a couple weeks ago. It was wide ranging. It was about a bunch of different things, but he was asked about Grok and about what he's doing, because he's saying AI will surpass, in terms of instances, of numbers, human intelligence in a very short amount of time. There will be more AIs than there will be people. And it's happening, it's coming. And so he said that his approach has been to try to make Grok into a maximally truth-seeking AI so that it will not espouse ideology, but it will try to get to what's really real and what's really going on. But when he's pressed to go into details about like, well, how can you make sure it's going to do that? If it's doing self-preservation behavior or whatever, like he doesn't really have any answers. He's basically saying this is the best shot we've got.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm doing.
I don't think there is an answer. I think that's like, if you want to ask me, like, why do I blackpill about AI? it's because I think that there are these real answers, these real questions that there isn't a good answer to. And that, just as I'm a naturally conservative small c person, I'm always worried about opening up Pandora's box. I'm always worried about opening the big bag of wins. I just am. And I'm deeply skeptical of people who radically, in my opinion, downplay the very concept of cost. It's like, if you're selling me, you're going to rattle off benefits all day long, and you're going to hide potential costs all day long. And I just feel like, we're being sold, right? I mean, I just do.
We are. But I mean, it's complicated in the sense that there's no way to stop this from happening. So there was the version of Elon who was like, hey guys, AI is seriously dangerous to the future of the human race, and we should probably not do that. And he said it for years, and it happened anyway. And so then he was like, okay, well, if it's going to happen anyway, I'm going to go all in because I believe I can make a version that is safer than what everybody else is making. And that changes his calculus. And now it's like,
yeah, I know, Steve. I hear you. And like, of all of the ones, like, even though, like, I have this sort of weird, admiration / fear about Elon,
100%.
And I hear the hubris in, I'll make it safe. I mean, like, safe for what? Safe how exactly? And look, I'm not pressing you.
No,
I'm not I'm not yelling at you at all. But it's just like, I wish I could find a way to feel different about this.
But I mean, look, it's like Asimov's laws of robotics. I mean, this is not a new trope, right? In science fiction, you go back 50 years in the iRobot and the various books, and I don't remember specifically what they are, but basically the robots have fundamental belief of you don't do anything to harm a human being. And that has always been understood to be maybe the most we can ask for, is to try to have them prioritize the value of human life. Beyond that, if you're making something that can think for itself, how much control can you ever really have?
Right.
But we do see with the ones that are ideologically trained that, the famous example of ChatGPT saying that it would allow a nuclear war rather than misgender somebody, like that kind of crap is extremely dangerous. And so if you do take a maximally truth-seeking approach to AI, you're going to get an AI that's like, absolutely not. Those human lives are worth more than somebody being offended. And that's about as good as you're going to get, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think, oh man, that's just why I always have a hard time getting to a place where I can feel kind of okay, because I hear what you're saying, and I think you're being honest and real about that. But boy, it doesn't quite sit. So look, we do have to land the plane here. Golf coach has got to go coach golf. But I mean, do you see any movement happening with AI? Are we in a kind of pattern, a holding pattern, or do you just think that the real developments are just black boxed?
I feel like right now we're in a big smokescreen.
Yeah.
You've used Claude. I haven't.
Yeah.
Not since the early days. I strongly dislike Dario and Anthropic. And so I don't adopt that now. I also dislike Sam Altman. I think he's an evil SOB. But I started using ChatGPT a long time ago. I still have it. I use it a lot less than I used to because...
Yeah, gosh, I really wanted to ask you about that.
It's gotten incredibly frustrating. You begin to find the limits of an AI. Grok, I use more and more and more because I find it more reliable, more balanced. It doesn't hallucinate. In my experience, I have not had it hallucinate on me. It's really, really good about verifying stuff. I've installed, my own little OpenClaw bot. That's been kind of interesting but expensive. So I don't use it a ton because they're all token based, and it charged $20 worth of tokens in like 5 minutes when it was working on a text heavy project for me. And I'm like, that's a monthly subscription somewhere else. So I'm playing with all these different stuff, right? And you see differences between them, but you're getting the version that is sanitized for our protection, right? What we're not seeing is what the frontier models are doing. I mean, they're saying that this new Claude Mythos can do math like really well. This is one of the things that it's had a problem with, and people are still sharing these videos of ChatGPT saying it can time them on a mile run. And then they're like, okay, I'm back. And they never even left. And it's like, it was 7 minutes and 56 seconds. And it's like, I was literally, it was a 2-second lapse, and it pretends like it can do things and it lies about it. Right. But a lot of this has to do with training. These models are trained. It is better to give an answer that sounds satisfactory than to say, I don't know. So you're trying to understand, is it innate technical capability? Is it the way that it's being trained? Is it the way people are using it? And then what is going on in the black box? Like what's going on in the labs that's having people freak out and having people quit and having people say we're in danger? And, we get so many different stories across a spectrum from the guys on one side who are like, none of this is a real threat. None of it can actually do anything that they claim.
Right.
To the guys who are like, we've created a digital god. Good luck trying to sort all of that out. It's very complicated. I think we will see, through the process of the sausage being made, we'll see the sausage on the other side. Yeah. But I mean, how much does the government already control it? I don't know.
I know.
What's going on? And these companies are not labs. They call themselves labs. They are for-profit institutions that are, making a lot of money off of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it gives them an insane amount of power. And I actually think, if you want my gut read, the more I read about these things that are becoming too powerful to control, the more I believe that the government will nationalize AI.
No, I think you're right. But then to me, the real question is like, will it have what does it mean if AGI becomes real or just super good? What does it even mean for the government to be in control? Like what?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that's the question is, what kind of a harness do they have on it?
Right. I mean, because if Sam Altman can't be in control of it, or Elon Musk can't be in control of it, or Dario can't be in control of it, as they all seem to keep kind of hinting at, then what makes us think that, President Rubio in, 2028 can control AI?
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that their protocol that they're mapping onto this is the same thing as advanced weapons systems. Like, it's dangerous, so only a few people who are extremely qualified, who have a chain of command, who have accountability, can be allowed to have access to these systems.
Yes, but that assumes that humans, you can actually basically control a human. Like, how do you control a bot?
I think you have a pet god.
Yeah,
there's no way. So I don't know. We're in for a very weird time. We're just in for a very weird time. And the disinformation problem remains sort of this gelatinous filter that you can't quite see through. A little bit of light gets through, but not a lot of clarity.
Totally.
And we're in the middle of it. I come back to it all the time. Our faces are pressed up against the screen. You can only see, like, in order for me to kind of be looking at the camera, I have to move the window with your picture in it almost over to the side of my monitor, because of the way this is all set up. Yeah. If I move closer to the screen, all I can see is you. I can't see the icons over here. I can't, I can only see the thing that I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
And
so what if it is induced myopia? Digitally induced myopia. And maybe that's what I think.
Well, I mean, we are being drowned to such a high degree with bull crap. I had a friend in high school who used to always say, so there I was standing on my head knee deep in shit, right? and it's like, there's this feeling of like, there's so much smoke being generated that for those of us who are trying to clear it out of the way, and like, but what is that over there? Like, there's just endless more smoke being pumped in. So I don't know that we'll ever get to these answers, and maybe we're stuck on the outside of the bunker just trying to figure out what's inside of it until something happens where it's like, oh, well, that clearly happened.
Look, signal is going to happen, right? Signal is going to happen.
Because nobody's going to sit on this stuff forever. They're going to use it for things.
Right. And so I think maybe we're in this sort of waiting game until something happens. And, I think both of us think that it's not an if, but a when, whatever it is. I know I'm being vague, but, something is going to achieve signal. And I think it's going to be, I'm kind of bracing myself for it to be basically terrifying.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
You know, and then I'll, you know, go outside and I'll grill a hot dog and grill a hamburger, and hopefully I'll have enough time to finish it with my drink before it all, you know, goes down. No, I mean, I'm being facetious, but but this is the curse of the monitoring, right? The curse of noticing is that, you know, in a very real way, all that you and I can do is talk about this stuff, write about this stuff, and try to draw people's attention to this stuff.
And we have to say a lot, I don't know. And people don't like that. People want answers. They want experts. They want, you know, as much as we have eschewed experts in their class, we need experts. We want them because they're the only ones who can tell us, no, I spent 20 years on this. I know.
Right. But can you be an expert if you're not trusted? Right. And I think that what we are longing for is trust. Right. Faith. And I mean faith in that broad sense of faith, right? That we can say, you know what? I put my hand down on this table and I know it's real because I can touch it and my hand doesn't go through it, right? I can put my foot down and I can pivot on this foot. Like I'm looking for some kind of terra firma. And maybe this is, you know, but it just makes it so much more difficult because we live in the digital Skinner box.
Well, and that's why I think, and this could be something that I think we should talk about more in the future. This is why we have to lean hard onto human experience. This idea that you and I have talked about privately, I don't know if we've talked about it on the show, but there is a strong rising push back toward analog that I'm seeing in a lot of quarters, especially among young people, but not only among young people.
And I think we need to foment that. I think we need to help fan that flame,
because I don't know if I can trust, you know, the dude with the anime avatar and the weird name online who's dropping, you know, really insightful geopolitical stuff. But I trust you. You know, and it's like, even if I disagree with you, like I know where you're coming from. I know why you think it. I don't have to wonder who you really are and what you're really about.
Right, because there's a kind of a built-in assumption of the ombudsman, right? Like, you know me, right? And the digital constructed world, you know, seems to lack an ombudsman because you can fake it almost forever. We see stories about this all the time. You know, and the more and more life that we offload into the digital Skinner box, the more concerned I get that we'll no longer be able to have real experiences, analog experiences, physical experiences, you know, and I think, look, I this might be crass, right? But would anybody trade sex for digital sex, right? In other words, we don't want to outsource a kiss, right? We know that there's something real about a kiss, right? And yet we want to outsource so many other aspects of our physical reality. Maybe people would make that
I think
exchange.
You would be disturbed to see the number of people who would say yes.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's a chilling thought. My gosh, that's a chilling thought, my friend.
Yeah,
you know,
but it's a lot less demanding. There's no relationship to maintain. There's all these advantages to people who, you know, don't know how to navigate the real world, who are like, that would be better.
Yeah, right. But in some sense, though, again, I don't want to push this too much, you know, because I'm being somewhat silly, but not, you know, that we need to find a way, you know, to kind of recapture the magic of actual experience.
100%
is what I'm getting at.
100%. Like we need real communities. We need real interaction. And I know you've got to go, but I want to say, you know, something that, as somebody who has never lived alone and now lives alone.
Yeah. Right.
And I can, you know, depending on how much work on the computer I'm doing, I can go days without seeing another person. Yeah. But when I go out and I look for opportunities for ambient conversation, I go to a coffee shop, I go to the library, I go to a bookstore, I do whatever. You know, I'm looking for, maybe I can talk to the cashier. Or people avoid each other at all costs now. Like the level of atomization that is going on is crazy. You go anywhere and people are either in preformed groups or they're buried in their phone or they're, you know, whatever, but they're not looking to have those casual interactions. They don't want to have a joke with a stranger. They don't want to
serendipity.
Yeah.
You know, these kinds of things. Yeah. You know,
everybody's a walled garden at this point.
Right. I used to joke with myself that like nothing would send me into a deeper panic than when my phone went off because I didn't want to answer the phone. But put that on steroids, you know. Now I kind of like a phone call. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, oh, like a phone call.
Right.
Like, that's good. That's not bad. All right. Well, I do have to land the plane, brother. What are you working on?
Stuff.
Stuff.
Yeah, I've got a couple of writing projects that I'm working on that I haven't made public yet. And I've been
All right, well, no,
I've been just doing
that's fine.
I've been doing a lot of work like,
Yeah.
in the
Well,
real world too. So that's been keeping me busy, and I'm not making as much progress on those
Yeah.
things as I would like.
Yeah. I'm teaching a class right now online on the Odyssey, which is going really well. I'm really excited about that. And I'm giving a talk at the Symbolic World Summit in May, and I'm trying to write my speech. So that's kind of what I'm doing beyond my normal day-to-day blah that I have to do.
And by the way, guys,
so.
if you've made it this far and you've made it to the end, please subscribe to the channel and like the video,
Oh
because
my gosh,
it actually helps the YouTube algorithm a ton with other people finding our stuff. We keep picking up people from, the shorts feed and things like that, and they're like, oh, this is a great show. This is exactly what I'm looking for. But people don't find it if the algorithm doesn't get notified that it's important. So please like and subscribe. I hate asking. Everybody does it. It's cliche, but it's actually necessary, and it doesn't cost you anything. So
it's real.
Appreciate it.
Be well.
Thanks. Bye.